What a great spring morning this is. I mean, the sun's shining, the temperature is rising, the grass is greening, flowers are blooming, trees are budding, birds are singing, and some of us are still half sleeping. You know, I've got mixed feelings about daylight savings time. I love getting the extra hour sleep in the fall, but man, losing this hour of sleep in the spring, it's kind of a bummer, you know? It's like being forced to deal with jet lag and you haven't even left the ground. But I know it is what it is. And we're here this morning, and I appreciate those of you who moved your clocks up and made it to this morning's service. All right, it's a great spring morning. This morning, we're going to once again look closely at one of the I am statements which God made that we find in our Bibles. We find today's I am statement in the opening verse of John chapter 15. I encourage you to open a Bible or a Bible app to that chapter, but don't peek at the opening words, okay? While you're doing that, I want to just share a very quick and simple visual aid by means of introduction. I have up here, as you can see next to me, some lamps. And yes, these are the lamps that usually we use to decorate in the hallway. And of course, I've got them up here sitting on a table. But what you might not be able to see from where you're at is on the table I have this power strip. Now, you look at the lamps and you're looking at them and you're thinking, okay, let's turn them on. Well, what's wrong, you know? Well, the bulbs are not burnt out. I checked them earlier. Maybe this is part of the problem, right? Okay. They're not going to work unless they're plugged in, right? So let's plug them in. Okay. Here we go. Let me get this one. All right. Nothing's happening, right? All right, well, the power strip's not plugged in. I got it. Okay, let's do that. Still not working, right? We got to plug the power strip into a power source over here. Let's see what happens. Hey, there we go. There we go. I know this is, like I said, basic stuff, but you see the power strip, it just doesn't contain within itself the power that's needed, right, to light these lamps. Without the power strip being plugged in, these lamps, you see, they can't do what they were designed to do, which is to provide light. And in the same way, you and I, we do not have within ourselves the power, the ability, or the capacity to live our lives the way they were designed to be lived unless we're in connection with God. We just cannot possibly live the kind of life that pleases God without making the proper connection. You know, once the power strip was plugged into the outlet, the lamps worked. Once a person enters into a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, they become able at that point to begin to live life the way God designed them to live life. Some of you who know your Bible well, know the I am statements of Jesus well, you've already figured out the I am statement we're going to look at this morning. And others of you who went to chapter 15 might have already peeked. Shame on you, but you already know what that I am statement is. And it's the I am statement where Jesus makes the comment, I am the vine. Again, it's found in John chapter 15. I encourage you to follow along as I read the first opening 8 verses of that chapter. John chapter 15. Jesus is speaking and he says this, I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does not bear fruit, he prunes. Or that does bear fruit, he prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I've spoken to you. Remain in me, and also I will remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, and you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that's thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you remain in me, and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. You know, of the many things that we could come up with that Jesus does with this I am the vine statement, there are three things in particular this morning that I want to call our attention to. They are the facts that with this statement, you know, Jesus, first of all, does something very controversial. He identifies himself as the true vine. Secondly, with this I am statement, Jesus offers us something very relational. He makes it clear that we can choose to abide in him or not. And then third, with that statement, Jesus shares something informational. He makes it clear that our choice when it comes to our abiding in him, that affects the Father's choice as to what he will do with us. First, I want us to see that Jesus, I am the vine statement is controversial. I want you to notice here up front that Jesus begins this metaphorical teaching on the vine with the words, I am like the vine, right? No. He doesn't begin with, I am like the vine. Now, Jesus did employ a lot of like type of teachings. Jesus often, drew comparisons using the word like to teach spiritual truths. For instance, Jesus taught that the kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. He taught that the kingdom of heaven is like treasure, that's hidden in a field. He said the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed. Matthew, in his book, he records for us 10 different times when Jesus employed that phrase, the kingdom of heaven is like. And so you see, for sure, Jesus made use of the word like to draw comparisons. And I think many of us could imagine Jesus doing that with this particular teaching about the vine and the branches. I think many of us could just picture Jesus, walking along in the vineyard, right? With his disciples just, in tow, and then stopping for a moment and pausing and reaching out maybe and taking into his hands and rubbing in his fingers a grape leaf or a grapevine leaf, and we can just see him doing that, and then just kind of turning to his disciples and saying, I'm like a vine. Now, whether or not Jesus was anywhere near a vineyard, when he taught the things we read, we don't know. What we do know is that Jesus did not say to his disciples, I'm like a vine. And Jesus did not say to his disciples, I am a vine, as if he were one of many vines. No, Jesus said to his disciples, he said, I am the vine, the vine. And not only that, notice in that opening statement, he goes even further and he says, I am the true vine. As Neil Patel points out in his message on John chapter 15, those who heard Jesus that day probably knew exactly what he meant. He was talking about the people of Israel. Patel then goes on to show how throughout the Old Testament, the grapevine, it was a prominent symbol for the Jewish people, the nation of Israel. He even mentions that right in their temple, at the very center of their national life, the Jews had put this massive vine made of solid gold. I mean, the thing was over 90 feet high. And Patel shared how from Scripture, from Psalm 80, how the Scriptures liken the people of Israel to a vine. And how God, showed his desire to produce great things in and through Israel in that psalm. But then he went on to share how in Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 21, it revealed that, and I quote, even though Israel was well planted by the Lord, she didn't produce the fruit God wanted. And so Patel claimed You know what? By and large, he said, the Lord didn't find the fruit he was looking for in Israel. And I agree. And friends, that's what makes Jesus' claim here, I am the true vine, so scandalous and unexpected. Jesus was saying to the people of Israel, and he was saying to the religious leaders within earshot of his teaching, he was saying to them, you know, Israel, where you have fallen short, I've done the job. Where you have not measured up to God's righteous requirements, I have. Where you have failed as a nation on your mission to be a blessing to all the nations of the earth, I'm going to get the job done. Jesus, I am the true vine. Folks, it was a very controversial claim. It was outrageous. It was something that people thought, this is radical. And I wanted you to see that. But I also want you to see that Jesus, with this, I am the true vine statement, he offers us something very relational. He makes it very clear in this statement that we can choose to abide in him or not. Abide, it's one of those words we don't use very often in our language today. The vocabulary we use, it constantly is in flux, right? And I was thinking about that word abide, and I was thinking, you know, how can I get you to really grasp what's going on with this word? And so I thought of this particular illustration. Imagine a guy, okay, this guy getting down on one knee, and he's making a marriage proposal to the girl of his dreams, and as he's, you know, on his knee, his lip begins to quiver, and his hands become a little shaky, and maybe his eyes get a little bit misty, and he looks up at her and he says, honey, these last few months together, they've been absolutely incredible. And I love you more than I ever thought it was possible to love anyone. Imagine seeing that in the movie. You know, you can almost picture that, and you can almost picture the ladies in the crowd going, oh, and the guys are going, yeah. But we can picture this, right? We can almost imagine, you know, this happening in real life. We can see this type of thing taking place. But then imagine this. Try to picture this. Try to imagine the guy going on to say, I don't know what else I can say. I want to abide with you. In fact, I can't imagine going through the rest of my life without abiding with you. So what do you say? Will you marry me? Can we abide together? Come on, you know. We know the guy's not going to say, I want to abide with you. I can't imagine not abiding with you. We know what he's going to say. He's going to say, I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I cannot imagine living life without you. Well, friends, that's what abiding with Jesus is. It's living with Jesus. It's doing life together with Jesus, day in, day out, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. But I want you to also understand there's more here in this vine and branches metaphor than are just simply doing life together with Jesus. This metaphor is not about two equals coming together, which is what takes place when a man and woman come together in marriage. You've got two equals coming together. This metaphor is not about that type of a relationship. This is about extremely unequals coming together in relationship. Jesus is the vine, and we are the branches. Understand, the vine is not dependent upon the branches for survival. The branches, however, are dependent upon this vine. When Jesus says, apart from me, you can do nothing, I want you to understand, Jesus isn't saying that without him, it's impossible to be a good spouse or a good neighbor or a good friend. Jesus isn't saying that, without him, a person cannot become highly educated. He's not saying without him, a person can't become a community leader. Jesus' statement, apart from me, you can do nothing, it isn't meant to be taken along this idea of that you can't go through life. working 9 to 5 and taking vacations and having hobbies and having a fun social life. It's not meant to be taken that you can't have those things unless you're in a relationship with Him. We can, in fact, do those things, and we can do more, and we can do many, many things without Jesus. Rather than be taken that we can do nothing, period, in life without being in a good relationship with Jesus, Jesus' words here, apart from me, you can do nothing, they're meant to be understood to mean that unless you and I are in a good relationship with Him, we can do nothing to please the Father in heaven. You see, that's the real heart of this teaching. It's that God is the gardener. And as the gardener, He has specific desires for the vine that He's planted and the branches of that vine. He wants those branches to produce fruit to His liking. And Jesus, through this I am the true vine statement, is saying, apart from being in a relationship with Him, friends, it's impossible to do that. In one sermon that I read, there was a preacher who compiled a list of things that people often give when it comes to thinking about judgment and going to heaven. And again, what they're thinking about is, what do I have to do? What have I done in my life that pleases or will please the Father so that when I die, I will get to go to heaven because He will have been pleased with me. And he mentions things like, the things that comes to people's minds, things like, being a good family man or a good employee. He mentioned people not using swear words. He mentions people, listing being honest in business. He talks about how people would come, the things that would come to their mind would be like volunteering in the community or being generous or maybe, giving lots of money to the church or attending church on a regular basis or reading the Bible. Maybe assisting the poor, maybe serving in the military, maybe being a first responder, and on and on and on. He goes creating this list. And basically this list is this idea of people's thinking, if I do these things, enough of these good things to outweigh the bad things that I've done in my life, then God will be pleased with me at the end of my life and I'll get to go to heaven. And basically, after he finished making that big, huge list of things that people think of when they think of, what's it take to please the Father, he said, you know what? All of those things that I've listed, they all amount to a hill of beans when it comes to getting to heaven. Because, he says, it doesn't matter what you do, and it doesn't matter how you or people view what you do. Nothing that you or I could ever or will ever do will be pleasing to the Father in heaven if we're not connected in relationship with Jesus. And so you see, through this I am the vine statement, Jesus is offering us something relational. Jesus is saying, look, without me you can do nothing that pleases the Father in heaven. But with me, you can. And I'm inviting you into a relationship with me. I'm inviting you to allow me to provide for you and to bring into your life those things which will make it possible for you to live a life that pleases the Father. This is what Jesus is doing. He said, I'm inviting you into that kind of relationship. But I won't force you into that kind of relationship. Jesus is saying through this, you can abide with me, you can do life with me, or you can do life without me. The choice is yours. I want us to see that Jesus, in this, I am the vine and you are the branches statement, I want us to see how he's offering us something relational. But I also want us to see that in his I am the true vine and you are the branches metaphor, Jesus is offering us something informational. He makes it very clear to us that when it comes to our abiding in him, our choice, when it comes to that affects the Father's choice as to what he will do with us. Jesus describes what the Father does with the branches in one of two ways. He says the Father gathers and burns the unfruitful branches, and the Father prunes the fruitful ones. First, let's very quickly just consider Jesus' words about the Father gathering and burning the unfruitful branches and what it means. Those words, friends, they express a very, very harsh reality. By the way, before I mention what that harsh reality is, I just want you to be sure and point out to you that the difference, what makes the difference? What causes some branches to be fruitful and others to be unfruitful? The only difference that we're finding in this is this. Fruitful branches are those that are connected to the vine. Unfruitful branches are not connected to the vine. Again, being connected to the vine is being in it's being in a good relationship with Jesus, something that we're given the option of entering into or walking away from. And so you see, our choice as to having a relationship with Jesus, if we choose to have one, that determines what the Father's going to do with us. If we choose not to have one, it determines what the Father's going to do with us. One preacher put it this way, he says, you can't please God without Jesus. Have you considered the implications? A Muslim cannot please God, no matter how devoted he may be. Until he's connected to the vine, he cannot produce the fruit of true righteousness that God's looking for. A Jew cannot please God, no matter how strictly he follows the law. He can only please God when he's connected to the vine, the Lord Jesus Christ. The moral American who goes to church every Sunday, who doesn't cheat on his taxes, who provides for his family, he cannot please God apart from Jesus Christ. You and I are not able to please God except when we have clung to the vine in humble dependence. You see, friends, our choice to reject Jesus makes us unfruitful branches which the Father says he will gather and burn. And the burning, Jesus mentions, that's the harsh reality of this passage. Jesus is saying those people who reject him, refuse to enter into this relationship he offers them, they will spend their eternity in the lake of fire. They'll spend their eternity in hell, not heaven. But on the other hand, those branches that are attached to the vine, the Father prunes, Jesus says, so that they'll produce more fruit than they would if they were not pruned. Again, if they're connected to the vine, they are going to produce fruit. But Jesus says, concerning those vines that are those branches that are connected, he said, the Father's going to do something with those branches as well. He's not going to gather them and burn them. He's going to prune them. Again, I liked what Neil Patel wrote. He wrote, fruitful branches are pruned by the Father. Although not much is said in this passage about what that pruning looks like, it seems clear that this is a painful process, and it purifies the branches. Did you know that even fruitful branches endure hardship? Actually, we can say that they especially endure hardship. God brings his branches through painful circumstances. We instinctively assume, he writes, that hardship is God's way of punishing us or rejecting us, but Jesus tells us that the painful pruning process is not punishment. Instead, it's a tender gift of loving care. You know, we may not think of pruning as a loving act of God, but he assures us it is. No matter what way, shape, or form it comes in. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 11 basically teaches us the same idea. There we read this. For the moment, all discipline, we can kind of call that pruning. For the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant. But later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. Now, there are certainly a lot of other blessings, friends, that come from our being in relationship with Jesus. Our being in relationship with Jesus, our being connected to the vine makes us clean. Which means even though we are sinners, we go through life in this relationship with Jesus as forgiven sinners. Being in a relationship with Jesus enables us to have a powerful prayer life. And Jesus brings that up in this passage. Being in relationship with Jesus makes it possible for God to produce in our lives the fruit of the Spirit that we read about in Galatians chapter 5. It means all of those things and more. But ultimately, though, our decision to enter into and remain in this relationship with Jesus, it affects how the Father deals with us this way. We're not cut off and thrown into the fire. Rather, we are cherished, we are ministered to, and in the end, when our time on this world comes to an end, we'll be welcomed into the kingdom of heaven. I am the vine, Jesus said, and you are the branches. I wonder if there's anyone here today who's never made that connection. I remember years ago, the first time I was introduced to the idea of it, I was shocked by it. But then the more I thought about it, and the longer I've been in ministry, the more I've seen the reality of it. And I remember an individual preacher talking about the fact that there were so many people in his congregation who attended regularly, who could offer up awesome prayers, who gave, who supported the church through, volunteer work and things like that, who at the same time weren't saved because they weren't in a relationship with Jesus. For them, it was a matter of religious activity. And for them, it was all a matter of their trying to tip the scales because they did not understand what Jesus had really done for them. They didn't understand grace. And he said it was always so encouraging to him and so exciting for him to see when an individual who had been in church for years came to the reality that they weren't in a relationship and made the decision they wanted to be in that relationship. Again, I have no idea how many of you here today are only going through the motions, are just being religious, versus how many of you are actually in relationship with Jesus. But understand, as Jesus taught us in this passage, if you're not in relationship with him, nothing you're doing now, nothing you'll ever do will be pleasing to the Father. You have to enter into that relationship with him in order to receive the blessings of heaven, the blessing of forgiveness, the blessing of living a life that you were meant to live, one that pleases the Father. In these next few moments, friends, we're going to be singing a decision song. And in that song, there's an opportunity for you and I to have a conversation with God. And I've seen this as well. I've seen people who entered into a relationship with Jesus, and then after they entered the relationship with Jesus, started going back to depending on religion. In this next few moments as we sing this next song, here's an opportunity for you, if you've never entered into a relationship with Jesus, to do that. It's an opportunity for you if you entered into a relationship with Jesus but then began to depend on religion rather than relationship, to recommit yourself to depending upon the relationship. Apart from Christ, friends, we can do nothing that will be pleasing to the Father.